for MDE for the state. And with me is Sana Sarasak. She's the permits chief for MDE for the air programs. And we also have CSX here tonight, and we'll turn it over to Becky Hensley for a minute to introduce the people that she brought with her.
Thanks, Angela. Sana, can you share the slides? Just 1 second. We did bring a few extra folks from the CSX team on today's call. Leek Young is the general manager at the Curtis Bay Piers, and Brian Hammock, who's our director of state relations there in the Baltimore area. Really what we're going to focus on today is really just take a few minutes to focus on the incident that occurred on December 30th, and really to focus on the safety improvements that have been implemented at the site. Next slide. Okay. All right. So at CSX, we're committed to safe operations and to be an environmental leader at our facility. We've operated we operate across roughly 21,000 track miles east of the Mississippi River and in 26 states. We've called Baltimore home for more than 200 years, and we're particularly proud of the work we do here in Maryland, working with the shippers and communities, moving freight and improving infrastructure. The Curtis Bay coal piers have been in operation for over 140 years. This site has a long history of safe operations and provides energy resources to you and the broader Baltimore community. The aerial photo on this slide helps show the Curtis Bay facility, but I wanted to point out the two piers that are near the top of the image. The pier on the left actually shows barges being filled with coal that are ready to transport across the harbor to the Baltimore power plant. This helps keep the lights on in Baltimore. The purpose of this facility is only to transfer coal to marine vessels for outbound shipment. We do recognize the energy transition, though, happening across the U.S. and the world. We recognize the role that CSX plays to help ensure a dependable access to fuel resources such as coal. CSX was also the first U.S. railroad to set science-based target initiatives to reduce our carbon intensity and to help reduce greenhouse gases overall. Rail is the most efficient mode of transportation by land. We move over a ton of freight, 537 miles with 1 gallon of diesel fuel. This efficiency helps us to reduce America's carbon footprint, relieve highway congestion. It's more important than ever that the freight industry moves all fuel efficiently and reliably. CSX is committed to be a part of the Baltimore community well into the future, and we are taking the lessons learned from the December incident to help improve safety and operations at the Curtis Bay site and other sites across our territories. All right, next slide, please. The unprecedented December incident occurred underground inside the North Reclaim Tunnel at the site. There were no injuries. This unexpected event did result, though, in a release of coal-related emissions from the tunnel. CSX took immediate action to ensure safety of all personnel on site and to notify the appropriate agencies. Terminal personnel immediately called 911 and followed company and regulatory emergency response guidelines. The Baltimore Fire Department and other local emergency response agencies were mobilized and were actually on site within 10 minutes of the 911 call. Within the first 24 hours, CSX and contractors were on site and in the community to help assess damage. A team went door to door in the immediate vicinity to check on our neighbors. On site at the pier, we found that most of the damage had actually occurred inside the North Reclaim Tunnel and affected conveyor equipment inside. One of the first actions we took was to verify safety at the facility. Monitors were used to help determine if gases and particulates were still in the air. We deployed a temporary mobile monitors on site to help us understand the site conditions, not only for the day of the incident, but to help us confirm that workers and the community around us were safe. The root cause investigation began immediately within the first 24 hours. We used an extensive team utilizing structural and electrical engineers, industrial hygiene scientists, hazardous materials experts, and a variety of environmental professionals. Next slide. The incident investigation report was very important to us, and it's helped us focus on what needed to happen to improve safety at the site and again, improve safety for the community. The primary causes of the incident were found to be the presence of methane inside the tunnel and a relatively low concentration of coal dust. The diagram on this side helps to show where our focus area was. It shows the 5 stacking tubes that are actually visible in Curtis Bay, where coal piles out for storage, and the North Reclaim Tunnel, which lies underneath. The North Reclaim Tunnel is actually shown in blue, and this has been our primary focus because of the conveyor equipment that was damaged during the incident and the permit that we're discussing today. Conveyor BC7 runs in that tunnel. It runs the full length of that tunnel, approximately 800 feet. It's our primary way of moving coal from the storage piles to help load out marine vessels that are at dock at the facility. CSX has worked closely with industry professionals and OSHA and MDE to help address all the root causes that we've identified and help enhance overall safety at the facility. Preventive measures have been incorporated in the OSHA settlement agreement, which was finalized last week, and in this permit, which we're discussing today. These measures include, first and foremost, improving the airflow to help prevent pockets of methane inside the tunnel, and a continuous monitoring inside the tunnel using a fixed gas detection system for flammable gases. These gases include carbon monoxide, methane, and oxygen, all of which are naturally occurring gases in our environment. We're also implementing additional dust control measures inside the tunnel. For dust control, this includes metal skirting panels that cover the conveyors and help prevent coal from dropping onto the tunnel floor, and using additional water sprays to help the coal settle on the conveyor belt for movement inside the tunnel. We've implemented increased airflow and gas monitoring first in our South Reclaim Tunnel, which occurred early in January. By using these results, we've helped demonstrate the effectiveness of using those measures and ensuring the safe working conditions in our tunnels. And that's why we're adding those on the north side. So what's next? What's next for CSX? Next slide, please, Sona. What's next? CSX has provided all the information that's been requested to MDE. We're looking forward to restoring our operations to a full capacity and doing our part to help ensure the energy reliability in the area. In short, we don't just operate in Baltimore, we actually are part of this community. We are committed to doing our part to protect the health and safety in Curtis Bay, and we really do appreciate everybody's time this evening and helping the focus for our permit. Thank you. Sona?
Well, thanks, Becky. But the purpose of this meeting is to provide information on a draft permit for the rebuild of the coal handling equipment that was damaged late last year. And we will focus on provisions when we present the permit on those matters that involve issues of most concern to the community, which are preventing another explosion, controlling dust, and monitoring for pollution at the fence line of the company. But before we talk about those provisions, I'll be quick. I want to point out something that I think is important to keep in mind. This permit is only one part of a larger set of actions that will provide enhanced measures to help address the 3 concerns I just mentioned. In addition to this permit, the 5-year operating permit held by CSX needs to be reevaluated by MDE next summer and issued in the fall of next year. And that reevaluation will provide the department with an opportunity to add further permit provisions if needed. There are also, as most of you probably know, settlement discussions going on now over the violations cited by MDE, the air pollution violations cited by MDE. Our hope is that settlement will include a locally supported project of high benefit to the community. And on top of all that, separate from the regulatory side of things, there's an extremely robust air monitoring project ongoing now in Curtis Bay, and it's only going to grow over time. And that effort will provide answers on local air pollution levels and help determine the type of sources that are causing that pollution. So just keep in mind that this permit is not the last bite at the regulatory apple. Now, Sana is going to talk about those provisions I just briefly mentioned. And after she's done walking you through the permit, limited pieces of the permit, we'll open the floor up for comments. And Sana will explain the ground rules on how we hope to manage that. So, Sana, take it away, please.
Okay, can everybody see this presentation here? I think it looks like it's finally loaded up. It takes a couple minutes. So CSX Transportation, Curtis Bay Piers facility, submitted a permit to construct application for the rebuild of their damaged coal handling equipment resulting from the explosion that happened in December of 2021. And we received the application in May of 2022. And then through the review, we asked for additional information, which CSX submitted to us in the months of July and August. So the three main areas of focus for the permit to construct, most importantly, was provisions to prevent another explosion, to implement what we believe is a necessary fence line monitoring system, and also additional enhanced dust control. So to prevent another explosion, the permit to construct requires CSX, as CSX also spoke to, which is part of their OSHA report, they're going to be equipping the North Reclaim Tunnel with improved tunnel airflow beyond a level prior to the December 30th incident. And it has to be maintained at a minimum of 300 feet per minute. They're also required to install and operate a fixed gas detection system inside the tunnel, which will monitor for methane in accordance with OSHA regulations. And they also will be implementing other preventative measures, which includes the metal skirting panels around the conveyors and water sprays that are within the tunnel to ensure safe working conditions and minimize the fugitive dust inside the tunnel. For fence line monitoring, the permit to construct requires CSX to submit a fence line monitoring plan to the department for review and approval, and it must include details for the installation and operation of a fence line monitoring system with the following minimum requirements: a continuous federal equivalent method monitor for both PM10, which is particulate matter with a diameter of 10 microns or less, and then also the fine particulate matter PM2.5, which is particulate matter with a diameter of 2.5 microns or less. And then in addition to the federal equivalent method monitor, at least one other co-located sensor so that there's collaboration between the two to determine that both monitors are reading correctly. They also are required to place multiple sensors around their property. And they're also required to also install a meteorological monitoring system so that it can measure meteorological conditions when these measurements are taken. For dust control, currently the permit to construct requires them to comply with the requirements of the fugitive dust plan that's currently approved and in their state operating permit. The permit to construct also requires them to submit a revised fugitive dust plan with enhanced measures, improved measures to identify and mitigate fugitive dust from all potential sources at the premises. In addition, we also, as a protective public health measure, we requested a more robust analysis of toxic air pollutants. So CSX was required to evaluate emissions from the entire facility, not just the north area. They were required to evaluate individual constituents for metals within coal, such as chromium, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, nickel, copper, selenium, beryllium, cobalt, manganese, antimony, and barium. And then as a whole, they also, as separate pollutants, evaluated coal dust and crystalline silica emissions. And they used worst case assumptions to estimate those emissions. Using the most conservative method, so our air toxics analysis demonstration starts in tiers. And so tier 1 is your most conservative method. And what that is a maximum allowable emission rate. And so using the most conservative method, they were able to demonstrate that their estimated emissions of those constituents of metal that are in coal did not exceed the allowable emission rates for each of those toxic air pollutants based on the screening levels. And those screening levels are 100 times lower than levels approved for worker exposure at the facility itself. For emissions of coal dust and crystalline silica, we required additional TAP modeling. And the modeling results showed slightly elevated concentrations of coal dust and crystalline silica. We believe this is not a public health concern at this time because the model showed that elevated concentrations occurred only 3 times on one specific day of the meteorological data used in the model during the winter. The point at which the elevated concentrations occurred was on CSX's property and not accessible to the public. And the model used worst case conditions to estimate emissions. And also, again, the regulatory concentrations for coal dust and crystalline silica include a 1 in 100 safety factor beyond the level set to protect young, healthy workers.
And that's it. Those are the main provisions in the permit. The permit's available, I think there's online. I think the address has been sent to everybody. It's part of the public notice. I guess we're at the stage now where we're gonna take comments. Some you want to go through your ground rules on how to keep order, so to speak?
Sure. So right now, everyone is muted. What we're going to try and do to kind of keep things in order is if you are on your computer, and it looks like there isn't anyone calling in from a phone number, but I'll double check the list to make sure. But on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, there should be like an icon. It's got a triangle, square, and circle. And if you hover over it, it says activities. If you click on that, it should have a Q&A. So you can click on the Q&A and you can submit questions or comments via the Q&A box. And we can call on you that way. There's also at the bottom of your screen a hand, and you're able to raise the hand. So it would look, if you press the button, it would look like this. And then I'll be able to call on you and then lower your hand. And when I call on you, you'll be able to unmute yourself and share. We just ask that first you announce, state your name and your affiliation before making any comments. And then also if you could go back and remute yourself so that we can go to the next comment. I think that's it for now, Angela. Is there anything else I forgot?
Don't think so.
Okay.
I don't see any hands raised yet.
Yeah, I don't see any raised hands yet, and I don't see any questions. So like I said, there's a Q&A box. Oh, here we go. Okay, I believe it's Melanie. Let's go ahead and unmute yourself, Melanie.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. Excuse me. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for sharing and adding in fence line monitoring, which is something that we've been calling for. And let me back up. I'm Melanie Thomas with the South Baltimore Community Land Trust here in Curtis Bay. And one thing that I do want to make clear for the record is that SBCLT, we are not in support of this permit, although the fence line monitoring is in there, which is something we've been calling for. But we believe that MDE does not have sufficient information to issue the permit. And as the regulatory authority, MDE is required to ensure that requirements of the Federal Clean Air Act are met. And it cannot do so in regard to the permit without the information about the gases, including methane, volatile organic compounds, and different things that are being emitted, which I did not see or hear in the presentation. So that is my comment.
Thanks, Melanie.
I think next was Greg Sautel, if you want to unmute yourself. Oh, I don't know. Or so I'm sorry, Angela, did you want to talk about that?
No, just keep taking comments.
Okay.
All right. Good evening. I'm Greg Sautel, co-president of the Community of Curtis Bay Association. Our meetings take place 750 feet from the CSX coal terminal. And that's where the neighborhood rec center is, where children are asked to come to a safe place to play, free of toxins and hazards. We don't have that in our community. If this permit moves through, we still won't have that in our community. CCBA's position is the same as the South Baltimore Community Land Trust's. We strongly oppose proceeding with this permit. MDE does not have sufficient information to issue this permit, to say the least. MDE is required to ensure that the requirements of the Federal Clean Air Act are met, and it cannot do so in regard to this permit without information about gases, including methane and volatile organic compounds that are being emitted by the terminal. That's the extent of my comment. Now my statement. We heard from CSX moments ago that there were no injuries as a result of this catastrophic event. That is inaccurate, to be kind, but more honestly, it's a lie. Thousands of pounds of toxic hazardous coal dust were emitted into a community where people live, where workers were at a rec center. Human beings went to the emergency room the day of. Human beings were exposed to a toxic hazardous substance that they breathed in. Photographic evidence has been presented to MDE, to Baltimore City Council, to other authorities, which clearly shows toxic hazardous substance of coal dust on people's faces. It is reasonable to expect that people breathed in and inhaled toxic hazardous coal dust into their lungs. Human beings were affected. Human beings continue to be affected. Human beings will be affected if this permit continues. We cannot allow that to happen. The explosion was a one-day incident. As we heard, this terminal has been operating for over 100 years, and we are being asked to celebrate that just now, our state regulators are suggesting that air quality monitors will be required on the fence line. Let's think about that for one moment. 100 years of operation, and now in 2022, at hopefully the tail end of a global pandemic, we are just now requiring that a facility of this magnitude should put air quality monitors on their fence line when we have a rec center 750 feet away. Residents have reported for decades toxic hazardous coal dust on their homes, on their cars, in their lungs from this facility. The Maryland Department of the Environment has not once used their regulatory authority to fine this toxic polluter until this explosion. Nothing in this permit accounts for the revelation that should have been known from the beginning, that methane is a known, or coal is a known source of methane. The coal pile is a source of methane. No data analysis has been done. No one on this call can make an accurate statement as to the magnitude of the methane emissions from this facility. And yet, our government would have us proceed with a permit that will allow business as usual to continue.
Thanks for your comment, Greg. I think Alicia Porter had her hand up, I think. I'm with Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Councilwoman Felicia Porter. I represent District 10, which includes the Curtis Bay community, and I stand in solidarity with the residents that presented their testimonies on the coal explosion at the investigative hearing with the Baltimore City Council. I stand in opposition with the community, sharing not only the ramifications, the public health threats to this respective incident, but the public health harm and threats that have been exhibited for decades, not only within this community of Curtis Bay, but also Wagner's Point and all of the South Baltimore communities, not just District 10, but Districts 1 and 11, all throughout the city. I stand in opposition of this permit. I think that we have to not only prioritize the community's concerns, given that they are directly impacted by the public health harms and threats exhibited by CSX. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your comment. You're welcome.
Angela, I think we have one more. It's Shashada Campbell. Ms. Campbell?
Yes, hi all. Thank you all for your presentations today. I have went to school in Curtis Bay, and I have also done a lot of outreach in Curtis Bay to talk to residents about this incident. And I must say that residents do not see that after this explosion, there has been anything made to actually make sure this doesn't happen again. MDE does not have significant information to issue this permit. MDE is required to ensure that requirements of the Federal Clean Air Act are met, and it cannot do so in regard to this permit without information about the gases, including methane, and organic compounds that are being emitted by this terminal. And I think that I don't understand why this is being so rushed. We just got this information about methane being a gas that nobody even expected. We don't know how much methane is being produced to be able to say that it's not enough to actually regulate it. And then also that CSX themselves will be doing the margin of that methane does not make sense. I think that residents have already complained multiple times about the dust ending up on their homes. Residents aren't opening their windows. It has gotten that it's been that bad that residents don't open their windows because of this dust that's going into their homes. And I think that it is MDE's job to make sure that residents aren't suffering and their environment aren't suffering in this way to these companies. And so they should be held accountable in a better way. It should not be just business as usual for them because residents are suffering. Kids that plays on the wreck, again, as Greg mentioned, that's literally less than 700 feet away from this coal pile, need a guarantee that this explosion won't happen again. And no one on this call can say that they can guarantee it won't happen again. There has been 100-year history of this community being used as a dumping ground and a sacrifice zone for these companies to do whatever they want to and just get away with it. And what we're saying is don't allow that. Don't do that. Don't just issue this permit without knowing what exactly you're issuing it for in regards to the fact that no one knew methane was a gas that was being produced. So you don't know what else is being produced. And there haven't been any measures to make sure that this explosion won't happen again. So I stand with everyone else and what they said that I definitely oppose this permit being issued.
Thanks for your comment. Are there more?
I think Greg Sawtell, he has his hand raised again.
I want to share one thing that I forgot to mention in my previous statement, and my hand got lowered, which is that we were told in advance of this, I don't know exactly what to call it, informational session, info session, I suppose, by Maryland Department of the Environment, that Maryland Department of the Environment's position is that this meeting isn't legally required, that there's no public participation requirement in this process. So what you're hearing from tonight are representatives. Residents are not, let me choose my words, making choices about how to survive in their neighborhood. And we find it insulting. And again, we challenge MDE's position about the permit. But this is a note for anyone who's here who isn't in the community, that we were told that this meeting essentially is an opportunity to show up and learn. But in terms of public participation, there's no legal requirement to that MDE is abiding by to allow for public comment. And so if we think about the gravity and what's at stake here with moving forward, just think about what it means to be told as a resident throughout this entire process after the explosion that we get to this point, and that to be told by the government that, yeah, you can show up, but just so you know, there's no actual requirement that we listen or that your right to participate as a resident, it's not a real legal thing. We're just going to do this. So just bear that in mind.
Understood. Point taken.
And if there's a response, just to confirm what I said, if that's accurate as to what we were told, you can take any of my commentary away, but were we told or not that MDE's position that there is no public requirement to even do this meeting?
Yes, it's when you read the statute and you apply the requirements in the statute to this project, the answer comes out. Public review is not a mandated thing to happen. We have to live within our statutory authority. You can't change that. But we did want to make known what's in the permit and have an opportunity to present anything you want about what's in it, and good or bad. And Melanie talked about one good thing, and there's other things you want to let us know about, send us an email. There's an email address in the notice. Call us up, whatever the case may be, but give us your thoughts.
Right, just to reiterate, we are accepting comments on this permit through September 6th. So if you would like to submit it, you can submit it to my email. It's listed on the notice, and it's on our website. The notice is also on our website as well. If you go to the MDE Air Quality Permits landing page, you'll see it at the top of that page.
I guess the last scan for anybody's got their hand up or anything in the chat room or whatever the case may be. You see anything, Sana? I don't.
Yeah, I don't see any questions. Oh, we have another hand raised. Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I also just want to speak to how fast this is moving from this permit only giving people, residents, and people that actually care about this issue, up until September the 6th to be able to put a comment in is ridiculous. Residents just learned about this meeting recently. And so it's just very ridiculous that this is being rushed at this rate. When residents actually doing that, when that explosion happened, residents went to the hospital. Like, they went to the hospital because of, they didn't know what they was exposed to. That horror, that trauma, that's not being talked about as a part of the problem. That's not being talked about when we say things like there was reportedly no injuries. No one knows, right? Because you clearly did not talk to residents, and we have, and we know that they went to the hospital. They still have pictures when this happened. They are saying that they survived a coal explosion. And so it is very ridiculous to sit here and say that there hasn't been injuries, first of all. And second of all, for this process to be rushed when we need to take the time to actually understand what gases are being produced at this coal pile, that and how much. And what is it going to take? Another explosion, a bigger explosion, for us to actually be like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be just giving another permit without doing the work of actually identifying these gases and actually the amounts that's being produced so we can actually regulate it. It's very ridiculous. And I just want to say that too.
No, appreciate your thought. Craig, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, and to the point of the pace that we're being asked to, sounds like I'm getting a little notice here. As to the rush, the question, the timeline here, we asked that question again to MDE. We learned about this a couple days ago, got the documents to look at again a couple days ago, and now we're here being asked to give comment in 5 days. That was the first question, is what's driving this timeline? And just again, to confirm, what the answer we were given was the situation in Europe is driving the timeline in Curtis Bay. So again, and I'd like, comment on that, but just think about that. Residents in Curtis Bay, 100-year plus history of explosions, spills, leaks, premature death from cancer, 50% avertible death rate, hazard after hazard, going to school, shelter in place order, unidentified chemical leak, no clear accountability. That's the year after year, the experience. And there's been different justifications, sometimes it's, well, we're contributing to global commerce. Sometimes it's you're contributing to innovation, take one for the team, take it on the chin. We've heard this before. And so we asked, is that an official directive? Is there someone is telling, maybe not the community, but MDE, that there's a reason to rush this process? No, there was no response to that, but we're asking it again, maybe in this public setting, for an official explanation as to why are we moving now with 5 days to provide comment for an issue of this magnitude when we have so little data about an issue that was just surfaced, the methane and the volatile organic compounds. What's the rush?
Well, it's tied up in a lot of legal complications that are beyond me to be able to explain very well, but it gets into the issue of the company has a federal common carrier license, and there's issues about delaying their obligation to meet delivery deadlines and a whole host of other things. And one thing that makes brings a resolution to some of that is issue a permit in a timely manner. And there's a risk if we don't. We run the risk of losing a lot. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I really can't explain it very well. But when you weigh all the benefits and the cons, the pros and cons to speeding this process up a lot, what comes out is it's better to do this quickly and issue a permit and get locked into that permit a number of things that are good for the community. I know it's not going to correct 100 years of community concerns and lack of action in the past, but it's we look at the permit as it's got some good measures in it. And as I said earlier, it's not the only bite at the apple. There will be other chances to have even more control for on the part of us controlling the company in the future. And that's as honest an answer as I can give you.
Hi, Angelo. I just wanted to add, the application was submitted May 22nd. During the review, we did ask for several additional extensive pieces of information to complete the application. So it has been in-house since May 22nd. So it's not and it's been under review during this time. So it does, while it seems like it's quick, it's within our standard permit turnaround time for a permit that's not subject to public participation. So just to keep that in mind. Before we go back to the hand raising, there was a question in the Q&A box. And it's Rachel Gadsden. She wanted to know, where will this meeting recording be made available? So typically with Google Meet, within about 24 hours or so, I'll be able to get a link to the recording. And it really just depends on how large the file is and the best way to be able to communicate that to people. If it's something that we can email to people upon request, or to everyone, all of the attendees will do that. If it's something we can post on our website, we can do that as well. But it should be, I think by this time tomorrow, I should be able to actually get the file to view and figure out the best way to communicate that to the public.
Melanie has her hand up again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add really quickly, with the representatives that were at the hearing, and they heard the trauma and how residents recounting how their children were affected by this experience and continue to be. This explosion happened in December. And, one resident and leader in the community shared how her twins are still suffering from this. So we're talking like post-traumatic stress. And although the permit was started in May, like after that hearing, after the release of the report, why the rush? I'm still not hearing a clear answer as to why rush this significant issue right now without truly having all the information in place to be able to make an informed decision as the regulatory authority.
Well, if you're speaking of methane, and the methane
and the VOCs as well.
We when you look at the literature and you look at what other coal companies face, we don't see VOC being an issue. There may be VOCs coming off, but it's nothing that raises to the level of it should be regulated. For methane, the primary concern is the methane in the tunnel, because it becomes an explosion issue related factor, and that's being addressed through the measures that CSX laid out and the measures that are being incorporated in the permit, and also what OSHA has done through their investigation. Methane off-gassing from the piles is again, it's not an explosion issue. It's more of an issue from a greenhouse gas perspective, which we don't regulate. It's not a VOC. We don't regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act from coal operations yet. We don't have a regulation to give us the authority to do that. It's gonna be, in the future, we're gonna have to look at what should we do with coal piles. It's CSX. It's also another coal pile on the other side of the harbor. Every power plant that used to burn coal still has coal piles. There are coal piles in Western Maryland that and mining operations. It's a bigger picture from a greenhouse gas perspective. From an explosion perspective, methane in the ambient air is not, it'll never reach that level. And we don't see coal piles exploding around the country, or that's just the reality of the situation. And we also are partnering with, we already are partnering with University of Maryland, but there's a different group in the University of Maryland. It's the atmospheric sciences division, and they're doing some measuring methane as they're traveling around the community with a piece of equipment that they are using to give us numbers. We don't have any final numbers yet, but preliminary numbers are out, and we'll try to share them as soon as we can. It's my understanding is they're not showing dangerous levels, so to speak. And they're also not showing that the coal pile may not be the principal contributor to the methane levels within the community. So that's the preliminary status of all that. And we're not dismissing methane, but we have looked at it, and we're going to continue to look at it. And but it may be in a different context than through this permit action.
Is that characterization of the data safe to say, Angela? We've seen some of that preliminary data. Is that approved by the scientists who are performing those studies of the methane? I'm really shocked to hear you say that.
Well, I can't quote the numbers, but the levels that we were introduced to yesterday, which will be shared at some point soon, don't raise any alarm bells in terms of methane having an impact, a public health impact on the community. Again, it's greenhouse gases and it's explosion within the tunnel, but those are different things.
Can I respond really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So it's very concerning hearing you say that, or say that it's not a concern. During the hearing, we heard how even the representative from CSX shared that, CSX is only one of the 12 or 17 companies adding to the air pollution in the area. That is not a badge of honor. Like, we can't continue to just say, methane is not that, the emissions are not of serious concern, when that is not the only issue that the community is being affected by and impacted by. Like, this is serious. We're talking life and death. We're talking health of our future residents, our residents that are currently here suffering from things that they shouldn't have to suffer from, all because of the over concentration of the pollutant agents. And to hear you say as a regulatory authority that this is not to cause concern is alarming.
Yes,
it is very alarming. I'm sorry, Councilwoman, go ahead.
No, it is extremely alarming. And I'm Angelo, I like to follow up with you about that statement, because given that it was the number one contributor of, that OSHA designated at the explosion in the coal terminal, and to hear you say that is extremely concerning. So I'm gonna have my office reach out to you tomorrow to learn more about this preliminary data that you have, and I'd like to include some of the state legislators as well in that hearing, so that we can fully understand not only this preliminary data, but really understand what a question that I brought up during the hearing. If we have these pollutants in the air, what is MDE's role in all of this if we're not truly regulating the pollutants that are emitting that are emitting in our communities? Thank you.
No, maybe I need to clarify, and I don't think it was clarified well enough at the hearing either, that methane in the tunnel is a whole different issue than ambient, the methane in off-gassing from the coal piles. Yes, methane buildup in the tunnel is a serious concern, because look what happened back in December. But that's being addressed through the measures that we are including in the permit, the measures the company is including in their physical structure.
Sir, respectfully, that is false. That is false. And as I'm not sure. I'm not sure where you're getting that from, but methane is methane. It's a harm. If it's a harm, it's a harm. Point blank and simple. And so I just wanted to clear that up and stop you right there.
We can have a further discussion, and we'll bring in the people that have actually collected the data.
Yeah, and I would love to know where you got the data from. Like, where did you get these numbers? Was it like another investigation by CSX themselves that gave
No,
you
no,
these
no.
numbers?
It was, like I said, it was University of Maryland has an instrument that they use to travel through the streets of Curtis Bay and measure methane at various spots. And they haven't published the data yet, but I'm just saying that preliminarily it doesn't raise alarm bells. And we can explain that in more detail at a later date, but we're not dismissing, we're not just cavalierly saying that we don't care about methane, but put it in the right context. There might be some misunderstandings about what the various contexts are, but I mean, I'll leave it at that. That's just leave it at that.
Okay, so Angelo, yeah, thank you guys for remembering to use the raise hand. We just want to kind of keep a little bit, a little bit more control over, so people are not talking over each other. So I think Melanie, you were next.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, ask a question rather. At what point will any findings raise any alarm bells?
I don't know the exact trigger point for where methane becomes a public health issue in the ambient air, but it's my layman's view is it's a very high number, and nowhere in the state of Maryland are methane levels anywhere near that. I mean, there's methane leaking from underground natural gas pipes, the wastewater treatment plant, the landfill, and it all contributes to a methane level in various parts of the city in Curtis Bay. And I don't know the exact numerical break point, but my understanding is that it's well below that break point.
Well below that break point when the landfill was underreporting their methane emissions for years. But anyway, I wanted to clarify a point that I said. We are saying 17 companies. We have over 70 chemical companies in our community that are contributing to the poor air quality and air pollution. And if that is not a crisis or a point to raise concern, I don't know what is.
No, I will say too that there's, and again, I can't make up for 100 years of what didn't happen, but there's a lot of focus being applied to Curtis Bay and on several fronts, not just by MDE, but University of Maryland, two branches of the University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, Bloomberg School, a number of other agencies are also involved, and in terms of time and money and resources, a lot of people have been providing a lot of services, and it's going to continue, and it's only going to grow. Again, we can't make up for lost time, so to speak, but moving forward, there's a lot of people working to get answers, and it's going to take some time. Some of these things, there's some uncertainties built into the answers you get from measuring data, and analyzing data, and things aren't always clear. Sometimes you just aren't absolutes, and you got to dig further, and all that takes time. In order for an MDE to act in a legal manner to deal with things, you got to have evidence, and I know that's probably a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but gathering evidence is key, and doing it right takes time. Getting the right answers takes time.
Gathering evidence, and then once you get the evidence, doing something with it, right? So with the finding and the evidence that just came out, why rush this permit, this renewal to rebuild something when there are still so many unanswered questions that are harmful to the community?
Well, again, I go back to the statement I made earlier. At some point, it was we need to have the regulatory authority to act to deal with a given pollutant. And for methane in the ambient air, we don't have the regulatory authority to deal with it. We're building in measures in the permit to deal with the explosion, but it's not being driven by our regulatory authority. It's being driven by essentially negotiations between us and the company to let it happen. It locks in something that's becomes a commitment, and it's got to be done through the permit. If they violate it, it becomes an enforceable requirement to enforce against it. We're not dismissing methane, but in terms of can we act on it under our current authority? The answer is no. Is it an issue? It is from a climate change perspective. Is it a public health threat? The answer that's going to come out is, I almost can guarantee this, it's no. No,
I mean, that's an
I
interesting way to start an investigation to predetermine the outcome. But for us, an explosion at a coal terminal 750 feet from is evidence, number one. Number two, I think it's time we stop pouring resources into a broken system. And this informational session today is just another indication that the way that the approach being taken here is not designed to address environmental justice. It isn't. It was a concession made by MDE at the very beginning. We took that as a sign of good faith, and we're going to continue working on this, but we've got to fix what's broken. And I'm just going to give one report, which we've already made to MDE. Nothing's been done to correct it. July 7th, there is an air monitoring effort going on in Curtis Bay. All the data, preliminary data, is equally accessible by residents and by MDE, except in this methane case. We do not have access to that data. All data from the monitoring work is shared with MDE, even though all the expense is borne by the community and our partners. But all the data is shared because we care about science. In the case of the methane, something else is going on. We have asked for the data for over a week. We're not being given it. That's not science. Something else is going on. July 7th, MDE compliance officers were in the field in Curtis Bay on Fairhaven Avenue in the afternoon. A resident who's lived in Curtis Bay since 1978 approached the MDE cluster of individuals, including a compliance officer, said, "What are you guys doing here?" "We're doing air monitoring." Resident says, "I want to show you the coal dust that gets on my home every day since I've lived here. I want to show you." The compliance officer ignored the resident who's lived there since 1978, said not a word. So let that sink in for a second. This incident was reported to the head of MDE's air division the evening of. It was acknowledged as a problem. MDE is not, the problem with MDE is it's not that it's not receiving evidence. It's what it does with the evidence it receives.
I just think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. Again, there's a lot going on between us and the community. I mean, it may not be perfect in the community's eyes, but you can only do what you can do with what you have, and it's going to take time to get all the answers. And I know it's probably not.
You're contesting the incident that I just reported?
I don't have the details. I'm not going to talk about something I'm not familiar with. So.
Okay, Mr. Sawtelle, I think Ms. Campbell has been waiting patiently with her hand raised, so I think we would like to give her an opportunity to speak as well.
No, I would. Greg is his question of if there have been happened is relevant.
Yeah, thanks, Shoshanda. I appreciate that. The opportunity to keep the floor for a second, because I think it's an important question. So you're not aware that this incident was reported to MDE on July 7th? Surprising to me that you're not aware of that, given the severity of it, because the community's been told for months now that no one's making reports. I witnessed a resident trying to make a report directly to MDE, and it was ignored. And then we reported it to the top leadership at MDE. If we have we have to be open to the possibility that this system needs significant change. Okay, this is not a gotcha. We are all in the same system together. If there's fundamental problems, we have to be honest enough to recognize them and get to the bottom of it. And if it starts here, it starts here. But if we can't be honest, this is all factual information. And if we can't acknowledge that there's a broken system to fix, we can't go anywhere. So go ahead.
No, again, I can't speak to the particulars, but we've been working together for quite a while, and we'll continue to work together. And if we can continue to fix what you contend is broken, we're happy to do that. It's just things happen, and again, it's not a perfect system, but we'll strive for that.
Yeah, and as we do that, you know what happens? CSX continues to be unaccountable. So that's what we're left with.
I think you can hold CSX accountable to better communication, which Becky pledged in her opening statement.
The resident, we
take advantage of it.
All right. There's okay.
I mean, it's going to take a lot to build a bridge. There's a lot of things that we're living with history, and we're living with distrust, and building that trust back with us and with the company and with the community. It isn't going to be easy, Greg, but it's we're pledging to try. May have some slips along the way, but it doesn't mean that we give up.
Last thing, Suna, I promise, but we would take that more seriously if there was acknowledgement when we give you real criticisms that might be difficult to acknowledge, and you can't even get to the point of acknowledgement, then that's not a good faith effort to build a new relationship. And as for CSX, that's not true. The emails sent by residents have never been responded to. And what we heard at the last hearing was, we're going to start a new email account. So I mean, respectfully, that's not serious. But with MDE, we have an opportunity between a community and a government, okay, who receives public resources to perform certain functions. It's a different relationship. It's a different thing between a private corporation and a community. It's a different relationship between a community and the government, who are public servants. And if the perception is that the industry has better access and that the government is more in tune with the needs of industry in a private corporation than with a community, then that is the sign of a broken system.
I can only pledge to move forward. I can't go back. If things were done in the wrong way or a misstep here and there, I can't acknowledge what I don't know. But if it happened, mea culpa on our part, and we'll pledge to do better. But I know you're not going to be shy about calling things to our attention, because it's the way it should work. And we have to be, we have to acknowledge what we have when we make a mistake. But I want to kind of leave this with we're trying to do better, and I hope everybody all around tries to do better. And at some point, things get better for everybody, including most importantly the community.
And I think I think that the point of like it'll get better for the community, or this passive, because I feel like it's in a passive spirit of like, oh well, it's gonna take time. There has been so much time to fix multiple things that happened in Curtis Bay. MDE is not a new department; like it's been around. It knows like it's not new. And the fact of the matter is, for a bridge to actually be built, it has to be built by both people, right? And so I feel like it feels like right now, when community is telling you things such as like even things that's supposed to be regulated, like the dust, residents are complaining about the dust. They've been complaining for a long time. That's not new. This explosion is just the only thing, the major event, I guess, that happened in MDE's eyes, but in community eyes, the major event that's happening all day, every day of their lives is the fact that dust is ending up in their homes. Dust is ended up in their lungs. Dust is ended up in their kids' lungs. This is problematic. What's in coal dust is ending up in their system. So this passive attitude of like, it's going to take time. How much time do residents actually have that lives near these polluting industries, especially CSX? And how much time? You can't speak to how much time residents have. So it's not just this passiveness around, well, we're going to have to do it in due time, while businesses just continue to do what they're doing, such as CSX. They're going to continue to get this permit as if it's okay what they've done. And residents are going to continue to suffer. Residents are suffering while companies get the upper hand, and while we're sitting here talking to you about a meeting that you say that you technically don't even have to have with us, when the impacts are felt by us. That makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's very frustrating. And there is MDE at a hearing. What's happening in their daily lives? MDE could have took that and said, "Oh my God, we need to go back and figure out what we can do, even about minimum the dust. Minimum. That is not a new event. So what is MDE going to even do about that? besides even regulating the methane, which you guys aren't going to do clearly, but like about things that you supposedly actually do regulate. What about the dust? What CSX say we're going to do better, and that's just it. You take them for their word. While residents
No.
weren't being heard, you take CSX for their word. That makes no sense.
No, like I said at the very beginning, the permit has measures in it to deal with dust. Is it perfect? No, it's a process. The operating permit next year is we're gonna evaluate this, between now and next summer to see if any improvements have resulted in less dust. And if we still need more measures to be put into place, there's a chance to do that next summer, next fall. It's a process we have to go through to be able to deal with that. And I will say that the explosion has changed the dynamic as far as how we view Curtis Bay. Maybe we didn't get enough attention. Obviously, it's like you said, it's been around for a long time, and we could have done something earlier. But everybody knows that the explosion has put a finer focus on things, and it's resulted so far in a lot of attention being given to Curtis Bay. Is it the end of it all? No. We're just going to have to keep plugging away until the issues are fine. That's where we are.
And you speak to attention, but how much attention? Until this is shoved under the rug, just like everything else that happens in Curtis Bay. It's just we give it attention for now because it's that people actually care about, and then it goes under the carpet and nothing happens until CSX blows up again. That's the attention. That attention don't matter when it doesn't yield any outcomes for residents that's suffering. It does not matter.
No, but yet, give us a chance. The monitoring effort's going to provide answers for informing us in terms of future policy. There's information we have to analyze and make a decision about, well, what does it mean and how do you change whatever those results are in the real world. I can't say enough. We're not abandoning Curtis Bay moving forward. The monitoring effort's going to go on for some time. The monitoring effort, the fence line of the company is going to go on for a long time. And we also applied for a federal grant back in March that we hope to hear in October that we actually got the award. Some of that money, a lot of that money is supposed to go towards more monitoring in Curtis Bay. I mean, we're not walking away. It's, we have to work within our structure and our resources to deal with things as best we can. I know that's a little comfort for somebody who's lived in Curtis Bay all their lives and being subject to dust. I would probably feel the same way, but I'm telling you as straight as I can that it's going to take some time and it's going to have to be a process. And if we all work together, including the company, we got a shot.
So is it that MDE is afraid of getting sued is the reason that there's never been an enforcement action about dust? Is that what it comes down to?
No, I think no. It's So you
don't believe that the dust is there, or what is it then?
No, it's up to the attorneys more than me, but it's having a case built on nuisance is. I know it in your eyes it would probably seem like, come on, we're being bombarded with coal dust. What's the problem? There's the proof, but legally it's a little higher bar that you have to meet. And not to say we haven't thought about it, but it really does take a lot of hard evidence, and they come to that point that I hope it doesn't reach that point, because then it means you're suffering even more. But I mean, that's the real reason we haven't taken any action. It's gathering evidence to prove that it's creating a nuisance, and the nuisance is coming from coal dust.
And so if residents in Roland Park were the ones experiencing coal dust, you're confident that MDE would never have issued an enforcement action or a fine of $25,000 a day up until this point? You feel confident in that? I
can't respond to that. It's such a hypothetical. No, I'm not going to go down that road. But
what I heard there is that you are afraid of getting losing or not having a strong case. So I take that as you don't believe that the evidence is strong that residents have shown you that there's coal dust.
I just have to disagree. Again, it's a high bar when it's a nuisance case involved. And the Attorney General's office gets involved, and you take a case based on the evidence you have, and you make sure that it's going to yield what you hope is the proper result. And
So right, so effectively residents are screwed because of a weak permit for CSX. There's really nothing that residents can do. You're asking residents just to live with it, and you're saying, well, just understand we're in a tough position that MDE's put itself in by creating a very weak permit that doesn't have much requirements for CSX to pollute. And you're saying we can't do anything, so live with it. I mean, we got to be realistic here. If that's what people are being asked to do, tell them to their faces, Curtis Bay residents, we're asking you to live with it.
no, well,
Because we
no,
can't figure it out.
No, I
Just
think-
be honest.
I'm trying to be honest, but what I say, you twist a little bit. You don't believe me, but it's we need help gathering evidence to pinpoint that on this particular day at this particular time, the dust from wherever it's coming from, CSX maybe, it's creating a nuisance, and a nuisance is a very vague term. And again, it gets down into the weeds of legal machinations, and I can't do it justice. Well, I'm not an attorney, but it's not to say we've ignored it or we haven't thought about it, but it's a really difficult road to go down.
Except for in July when a CSX compliance officer did literally ignore it. Except for then.
Yeah. I have to look into it. Like I said, what you're saying is it's raising some alarm bells in my head. So I gotta know the situation.
Yep, there were about 10 witnesses, and they'll all come forward and attest to it. So we can definitely do that.
And also, Greg, just with respect to the permit, this new draft permit does include requirements for CSX to submit an enhanced fugitive dust plan. So we do recognize that the original dust plan may not have been as comprehensive as we would like, and we'd like them to conduct an evaluation to determine what they believe, and they have to submit it to us for review and approval. So we will be revisiting the fugitive dust plan to make it a much stronger dust plan than what they're currently subject to.
And Suna, will a big part of that be increasing the amount of water that's sprayed onto the coal?
I'm sorry, it's Sana, not Suna. Just want to correct you, just to make sure, because that if you're going to see my name a lot, it's actually Sana.
Sorry.
So
I learned your pronunciation from others at MDE.
Yeah, I recognize that.
I genuinely apologize, but it's colleagues who've told me how to pronounce it.
It's okay. I just I used to take a passive approach of not correcting people, but then it became a 25-year-long problem. So I'm starting to try and correct people at the beginning. But anyway, I'm sorry about that. That was just an aside. But so the plan, so our compliance program and obviously the senior staff here and also the permits program will be working together to look at what CSX proposes for the plan, and it could include different measures for when water sprays are triggered. Like, that's part of it too. I mean, there are some in the draft permit. You'll see that it does say that we want them to evaluate what exactly triggers the use of the sprays, what meteorological conditions, et cetera, and to kind of justify if what they're currently doing is actually acceptable or not. So there will be enhanced measures in the next fugitive dust plan.
Okay, and what's the effect of spraying water in terms of methane emissions from the coal dust?
So I don't know, Angela, if you want me to answer this, but this is
I
actually
really
for
don't.
fugitive dust and not for methane, but for the methane that we believe led to the explosion based on what was reported in the OSHA report. That's inside the tunnel. We're actually asking them to increase their tunnel airflow, and that's recommended by OSHA, and they're monitoring that so that there's not going to be a concentration where there might be some sort of ignition source that could set off an explosion.
So MDE hasn't evaluated the question as to what spraying water on the coal will do in terms of an interaction, in terms of emissions rate of methane. Is that the answer?
So methane's not regulated under the permit to construct. So essentially the water spray is for fugitive dust, not for emissions of methane.
And more water may not be the answer. Maybe other measures, and maybe screens, and maybe whatever else. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
Right. Because the situation isn't fully understood, and MDE's response to that is to proceed. The community's response is to be cautious and wait until we've done more evaluation. Because an elementary question such as that you take in a high school chemistry class, that when you spray water on things, it has an effect. It's been a long time for me, but elementary questions like that this permit process will lead to an answer on have not been addressed in a manner that reflects the complexity of the situation. Okay, you might try to spray more water to mitigate more coal dust, but you might do something to the rate of methane emissions. I'm definitely a layman, okay? But residents are asking questions like that. We're coming to you for answers. We've tried going to CSX. That just seems like a very pointless exercise at this point. We come to MDE looking for answers, and there's not even a beginning of an answer to a question like that. Say, well, maybe water won't be the answer then. Maybe we'll do something else.
Well, the time to evaluate that is when we know if spraying more water is a solution. We'll look at it. I mean, it's down the road a bit.
Okay, I don't know who was first. It was either Shoshanda or Melanie. I don't know.
Mel, and then Rachel go. Then I'll go.
Okay. Go ahead, Melanie.
So Rachel said let Rachel go first.
Oh, I thought she said Melanie, then Rachel. So I'm sorry. Rachel, go ahead.
No, yeah, Rachel, go, please.
Yeah, so I just have a question, I guess, about the enhanced fugitive dust or the new fugitive dust plan. If you could clarify for me a little bit, Sana, you said that they have to investigate their operating procedures at CSX and do their own internal evaluation and then submit a new plan. What I'm wondering is, as the regulatory agency, will you be conducting any independent investigation of their dust output, which has been well documented by community members? So is this just going to be up to CSX to look into itself and say we're going to do this differently?
Well, we put a bit of a framework in the permit condition. You have to look at certain things and defend their decision. We also, there are other coal facilities around the country. When it comes time to debate the extra dust control measure, we're going to look at what they do. All designs are different, so it's never apples to apples, but we'll draw from where we can to help supplement our knowledge of what better dust control should look like.
And I guess, so in that same line, my other question is just about the new fence line monitoring and where that data will go. Or who is actually, I know MDE has to install the monitor, or sorry, CSX has to install the monitors. Are they the ones receiving that data that's gathered by those monitors, or is MDE receiving it? Will it be made available to the community? Who's supposed to be keeping track?
So the fence line monitoring plan has a few minimum requirements in the permit to construct, and the rest of it will be reviewed and approved by the department. And so part of that will be where the data goes, how the data is measured, how the monitors are calibrated. And our air monitoring program was pretty helpful in assisting me with establishing permit conditions at a minimum that they had to have, the federal equivalent method monitor there, and then they can put and then to also have a co-located monitor, and then to have other monitors around the site that provide upwind and downwind, data. So all of that is going to be something that's going to be worked out with the department, and something that the department has to approve.
And once we're gonna receive the data, and once we receive the data, it's public knowledge. we're going to report it out, whether it's going to be a summary fashion or I doubt we want to see all the raw data, but if that's what the community wants and people that are supporting the community from University of Maryland and Hopkins, then we'll provide it. It's public information at that point. Well, I guess back to you, Melanie.
Yeah, thank you. So my question, Sana, is that correct? That's it, right? Sana?
Yeah, Sana. Yep. Mhm.
So Sana, you mentioned venting, venting as a solution for methane. Can you speak a little bit about to that process? Like what is venting the methane?
So venting is actually not I wouldn't refer to it as venting. It's actually increasing the airflow in the tunnel so that there's less of a concentration of methane in any one area, because the tunnel is underground, it's completely covered. And so by increasing the airflow, they're not going to have a buildup of methane because there's going to be more, less of a concentration of the methane if there's more airflow through the tunnel.
And that air from the tunnel is never pushed out into the atmosphere, into the above.
The airflow does go out to the atmosphere, but it would be less of a concentration by increasing the airflow of any methane that's present, because you're mixing more air with the actual what's inside the tunnel. But also they're going to be installing monitors, and I'm not sure if CSX wants to chime in on exactly what those monitors are going to be measuring, but we do require, the permit does require them to put in methane monitors, which are, I believe, will be measuring, concentrations of methane.
Can CSX speak to that? They're still on?
It should still be on somewhere.
I can speak to that. The monitors inside the tunnel are, again, for methane, carbon monoxide, and oxygen. Again, for the safety requirements to kind of meet OSHA and to kind of make sure we are not reaching explosive concentrations inside the tunnel. So these are, again, based on the investigation report, there was a combination or an area where the methane accumulated. And so that's what we're working to make sure we don't ever repeat.
And if I can just go, because my question is similar on that that conversation. If the methane is just going to be vented out or air flowed out, whatever way, and it's just tracking the concentration of methane, how do you know how much methane is actually just being produced in general if it's just going out?
The air monitors in the tunnel actually will give us a concentration, and then we'll also know based on the ventilation, we know a flow rate going through the tunnel. So, and I think this is an opportunity, and we'll work with MDE to kind of help put together an educational resource to help explain really what's going on with the methane with the coal. So I hear what is going on with the conversation, and we'll work with MDE and then also with some of the coal shippers that we work with and provide more information.
So CSX or MD, how long has either party known about methane? To the extent that you could put together an educational brochure for the community.
Personally,
Becky
for
can
me
go.
recently, but
I think Becky was going to go first, and then Angela.
Well, like I said, we'll work with, we do work with the coal companies, and we can help bring their experts on and help close this out.
No, my question was, how long has the company known about the methane at the Curtis Bay Coal Terminal? That was my question.
As part of the investigation, it was coming to light.
And and then Angela, how long has MDE known about the methane issue at the coal?
I don't know the exact date, but
That's a consistent answer, because we've asked for a week now.
It's recently.
Yeah, we've asked that same question for a week now, and that's the same answer. We don't know the precise date. How long will it take to get the precise date?
I don't know, Greg. It's like recently is recently. It's like, what does it matter whether it's Friday or Thursday?
Okay.
It's very recent. It come to our attention. Again, because we don't regulate methane. That's the answer. That's why. The explosion brought methane to light as far as an explosion-related issue, but methane from coal piles was not on our radar screen, and now it is. But again, it's from a greenhouse gas perspective, not a public health perspective.
Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
Yeah, and I think that I wanted to speak a little to that because when we think about methane, methane is very toxic and is very dangerous for my health impact, which is what residents actually care about. So to say that like not from a health impact, blah blah blah, that seems very passive and ridiculous in a way because like residents still this now is going to be vented out more. So whatever was in those tunnels is going to be going even more into the air. Residents are still going to be breathing that in along with the coal dust that's flying around their homes and in their house. And so I guess, like when you think about methane, even capturing the methane and trying to not get into the air at landfills, it's a big thing, right? At landfills, I'm just not getting where's the passiveness coming from when it's a coal pile doing it, when it is the same exact thing. It's the producing of methane. But if this is happening at the landfill, this would be a different conversation. But what I'm getting to is that basically, for them to be permitted at a point in time when a landfill first started, you have to know that you found out or you knew whatever that they produce methane. So you put structures in place to like figure out what that methane capturing is. Why wouldn't those be the same exact tools you would be doing in this to say, how do we regulate this methane that's being produced? Especially since you don't know the amount for real. I mean, you say you got some preliminary numbers, but they're not factual numbers. That you can like guarantee to communities saying them. You wouldn't come to us and say these are the exact numbers of methane that's being produced. So I don't think that they are relevant unless they are exact for you to be able to measure it. So I guess what is making the methane from the coal pile so different from if this was happening at a landfill?
Well, we don't have a regulation yet on controlling methane from landfills. It's being developed. It's in its infancy.
Right.
And it does exist, and we recognize it, and it's being addressed as a greenhouse gas. It's the same philosophy, the approach we're going to take for methane from other sources. Leaking underground gas lines is a source of methane, and that's probably a larger source than coal piles. And so you kind of put your regulatory resources where the highest priorities are in terms of biggest bang for the buck. And landfills was as easy, was a low hanging fruit. But it's taking time to even address that. It's not that we don't care about it or you don't recognize it, but it's the regulatory process is a slow moving train. That's just a matter of governmental reality.
Yeah, and I get that, but I think the problem is to go back to the question of like, for us to be able to admit that about landfills, we have admitted that, right? We can say landfills are a really big source of methane, right? And a lot of like studies have going into the landfill. A lot of millions of dollars are going into the landfill to like even figure out how to figure out the capturing of the methane, blah blah blah. And I guess there was that transparency and that honesty to say that like there's methane, we're trying to figure it out. But when the same question is kind of being asked about the coal pile, like even simply, when did you guys know that the production of methane was happening, right? Like it was being produced. When did you know that was happening? And no one has been honest about that. I don't genuinely believe that CSX just found out about the production of methane and where they are all this time. And they've been around for over 100 and something years. There is no way that they are just finding out that methane is being produced. I think now they can't hide it because an explosion happened. But nevertheless, to go back to the question around, it does matter when you guys found out about the production of methane at this coal pile, because then that let us know as residents where was the transparency if you did know, because we've asked multiple questions before around that. And so the date of when you found out does matter to us, to get at what Greg was also talking about.
I don't know if we're ever going to be able to give an exact date. I mean, I have to leave it at that. all I know is it's recent. You know, it's not been on our radar screen. And again, it's only because a couple reasons. It's not regulated, and that's the primary reason. And it's not in the ambient air. It's not a public health threat. It only came to light when the OSHA report, at least from a general sense, said that there's methane being released from coal, which was, we got it in what, the end of June, early July. If you want to put a clock to it, that's about the best clock I can give you.
Yeah, and I think that also when it comes to this information, it's just to speak to the fact that I think that, and I think that even MD themselves, you guys should be able to admit that, like, you haven't done a good job when it came to Curtis Bay. You haven't done a good job in regulating and making sure residents are safe. You simply have not done that. And this is a process right now where you could do that. And we as residents and people that work in the community, that has experienced even that explosion, are telling you, like, to be better partners, because whenever you find something out about methane, you should have told us. You know, we feel as though that's how you work together. That's how you be transparent. That is how you hold people accountable for what they're doing in communities. And if there isn't going to be that transparency and that honesty, then I just don't, I don't see this relationship furthering in a way of like benefiting us as residents that are experiencing this on a daily.
I hear you.
I thought Melanie had raised her hand, but I see Greg's hand is raised as well. So I don't know if you guys want to both share some time here.
I was just going to ask the question for the CSX representatives. At what point was the source of methane discoverable as a contributor to the explosion? Before the OSHA study? Or at what point in the investigation in the report that you released was it discovered?
I'm not sure exactly if you're asking about inside the tunnel, but obviously, you know, that was a result of the investigation. You know, beyond that, tonight we're here to talk about the permit and the conditions in the tunnel, and you know, we're happy to have a further dialogue about further, you know, methane from other sources that do not pertain to this permit at another time.
Okay. And just for we're all clear, it's methane and other gases. Okay, and VOCs, I mean, methane's a clear climate threat. Coal in this case is a public health threat, and then the VOCs and other gases, public health threat. Okay, but the way it, in my mind at least, it connects to the informational hearing we're in right now is that residents were asked to come to this meeting and participate. CSX published a report with many of the findings that we're trying to grapple with right now on, I think it was July 27th, got that date correct? And we've never got an explanation as to why it was only made available to the public. We got it through MDE in August, 2 days before a public city council hearing, and just upwards of a week before this informational hearing. Why did CSX hold back that report from its neighbor for over a month? That's a question for CSX.
Forgive me, I fumbled with my mouse here. I appreciate the question, Greg. You know, it's a matter that we'll have to have continued dialogue about. I don't know that there's an answer that, you know, is going to satisfy us here tonight.
Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to something that the representatives from CSX said at the beginning about going door to door in the neighborhood after the explosion. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you actually heard from residents or what you did to, I don't know, we met residents whose windows were blown out by the explosion. So can you tell us about what you've actually done in those direct conversations with residents, since to my knowledge, no one had been able to talk to you until these hearings started happening.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, obviously we're here to talk about the construction permit, but,
Well, and it seems like
I'm happy to talk about this as well. We did start a door-to-door canvass in the immediate surrounding blocks. We talked to neighbors. We collected information about claims and how we could work with those impacted neighbors. We identified buildings that we could not contact. There was no one there. So we, tried to collect as much information about the structure and, was it a business name, or could we, get the address so we could try to find a resident's name to follow up with. So yeah, we heard that folks were impacted. We heard stories similar to what we've heard at the council hearings and at, just in the community when we're in the community.
On that thread, though, we're really confused because in the report that CSX made following the incident, it was shared with MDE, and then MDE shared it with us. CSX characterized the amount of dust that left the facility into the neighborhood as negligible. And now in the report that came out on July 27th, but we got a month later, it acknowledged a 12-block radius. And now tonight we're hearing that immediately CSX went into the neighborhood and talked to people, certainly must have been walking through sidewalks covered with coal dust. Maybe those were some of the footprints that we saw in photographs left behind. So if folks from CSX immediately went into the neighborhood and saw the coal dust, why was a report created that in black and white said the amount of coal dust in the neighborhood was negligible? Why would that happen?
Hey, this is Brian. You want me to take this one? This is
No,
Dan Schmidt.
Yeah.
Okay,
Dan,
go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I think there's a point of clarification with respect to how the investigation report spoke of a relatively small amount of coal dust. So what it's speaking to there is the initial cause of the explosion. And its conclusion was that methane provided the fuel, and this is where I think the language that you're getting, you're citing, a relatively small amount of coal dust combined with the methane to form the fuel in the initial explosion. So that's the statement about a relatively small amount of coal dust relates to the initial explosion.
So with that, relating to the initial explosion, so you've known from the beginning
Melanie,
that
keep going, but come back to me because I'll get the quote. I'll get the quote.
you've known from the beginning that methane was the contributor to this explosion, but didn't release that? Daniel, do you hear me?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
You just said that you clarified where it said just a small amount of, I can't even remember how you phrased it, but you said that it was only a small amount of coal that was released, and you said that was you clarified that it was because it was mixed, a small amount of coal was mixed with the methane which caused as a contributor to the explosion. So then that leads me to assume that you all knew from the beginning that methane was building up in that tunnel, which is an explosive risk and caused that explosion, but yet you failed to release it until months later. Is that correct in my assumption?
No, we did not know that airflow in the tunnel was inadequate to disperse methane. The emissions controls at the facility are designed to address fugitive dust. The tunnel is partially enclosed. This was the first indication that there was an issue with the buildup of methane in the tunnel. And again, the issue there is the accumulation of methane. So that's why, and this relates to the permit, the topic at hand, we have preventative actions in this permit, including increasing the airflow within the tunnel and continuous gas monitoring in the tunnel to make sure the incident does not reoccur.
At what point, though, did methane result? Did you all know about methane? When? What month? I need a specific month.
Well, the issue is that we didn't know that the ventilation in the tunnel was inadequate. I think it's generally common knowledge that carbon-based materials emit methane. The issue here at this, it's the subject of this permit, is how it related to the cause of the incident. And again, we did not know that the airflow was inadequate to disperse accumulations of methane.
So if you've known that the accumulation of methane could be a result of handling such a coal, but yet you took no measures to measure or be able to have an understanding as to what those levels were, am I missing something?
I don't know if you are missing something. This was we've been operating these tunnels for a long time. It was not known that the airflow was inadequate. This was an isolated incident. We've learned from it. We've learned the preventative measures, and we've taken the steps to ensure that it doesn't reoccur. I don't know that there's much more that I can offer with regard to that topic.
But to that point, though, coal is combustible, period. So you can't fully say that there's no way that an explosion will occur again with true surety, right?
Angelo, is that
Yeah.
MD? Do you want to take that?
I just think you can never have zero risk. It's just the way it is at times. But I think everything that is being done points to the fact that the fix is adequate. It's easy for me to say because I don't live across from the coal tunnel, but
Exactly, Angelo. Thank
no,
you.
I know, but you gotta base your decisions on the best information you have in terms of the
Base your
explosion.
decisions
That
off
seems
of-
to be the answer.
Base your decisions based off of what you just said. You don't live across from the facility. Wow.
Okay, and it took me a little while, but is that Mr. Daniel who was speaking before about the use of the word negligible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, in the initial report that CSX created about the explosion, page 3 says estimated emissions resulting from this combustion event were negligible compared to the PM released from the overpressure event. The airborne dust in the tunnel system is believed to be the most likely source of emissions with the potential to escape the property boundaries given the direction of the escape tunnel. I mean, we can read the entire paragraph, but CSX characterized the amount of dust that left the facility as negligible.
Yeah, I don't know if you're reading from the root cause investigation report.
No,
Again,
that's the initial report. What I'm getting at is really simple. It's that we're being asked, we received an immediate report following the incident that made a characterization of the amount of dust that was anticipated to have entered the neighborhood. And there were no numbers given, but it was broadly characterized, specifically characterizing using the word negligible. But tonight we've heard that CSX immediately deployed human beings into the neighborhood to knock on doors and canvass and talk to people. And if that happened, then it's difficult to understand how CSX would publish a document characterizing the amount of dust in the neighborhood as negligible.
And I can help. So you are talking about the excess emissions report that we provided to NDE. Again, that was required within 10 days of the incident, and we worked with GHD and some other experts to help quantify what we thought happened inside the tunnel, and that was prior to the full investigation report. So again, now that all that's been provided back to NDE, that helped us kind of, again, work on the permit and keep things moving along.
And in retrospect, do you regret the use of the, is that an adjective, of the adjective negligible?
From videos, we were doing video observations as well and drone footage, and through that, the majority of it fell back on our property.
So you don't regret the use of the word negligible to describe the coal dust that people were breathing in. Okay.
I guess maybe last call here, I guess. Yeah, I guess we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah, as a reminder, we're accepting comments through September 6th. So, my email address, it's sana.sarasac@maryland.gov, but it's all in the notice. It's on our website on the air permits landing page. So if you have a copy of the notice, my email is also there. We can also take messages by phone as well, but I feel like if you want to submit them in writing, there won't be any misinterpretation of your comments. So I would prefer that you submit them in writing via email, but you may also call my phone number as well. Oh, we have a raised hand from Ms. Campbell. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just have a clarifying question about the comment period. Since the comment period is literally a few days, what exactly would you do with those comments? Like, would you even have time to read them, or like, would they impact anything at all? Like, what is the reasoning for that if this is just being fast tracked anyway?
Well, we'll take into consideration the comment, and if it's something that can change what the permit now says within reason, then yeah, it's. I can't deal in the hypothetical, but we're not going to dismiss a comment just because it came in. It's going to be looked at. All right. Well, given where we are, let's call it a wrap, and appreciate everybody's comments and time spent on this, and I guess we'll close the recording will be ready in a few days. Donna?
Yeah, I hope so. It usually takes like 24 hours for them to send me the link to the video, and then I'll just have to check and see how large it is, or whether it's, what's the best way to be able to communicate that to the public, whether it's via email, or if it's too large, whether we can post it on our website, or find some sort of shared folder where everyone can view it that way as well. Because this is our first time using Google Meets as a meeting, I guess, platform. So we'll see what we get, but I do know that those files can get very large. So we'll try and figure out the best way to share it.
And I'm sorry, but I just assumed before we closed out, we would have received a direct response. I mean, the Community of Curtis Bay Association and the South Baltimore Community Land Trust both made official positions that they oppose the permit because of the lack of adequate information and the requirements of the Federal Clean Air Act. Are we to take the dismissal of the adjournment of this meeting without a response to that to mean that MDE has taken an affirmative position in response to that, and the permit is going to be halted?
We'll give you a response in writing. You deserve that.
Will that be by September 6th?
Yeah. It's yes. Put it in one word. Yes. All right. That's third time for the final call. So let's call it a wrap. Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.